Good evening. Takes a minute to get things set up here. We've been studying over the last few weeks Bible virtues. I've told you that I've taken these from a series of things that I had, and so sort of modeled our lessons off of these. And what I've strived to do is look at for some examples of whatever the specific virtue is, and also find a story that sort of matches. We may not have found that perfectly, although what Leland read tonight is going to be the basis, at least the start of it. But then we're really going to look into some aspects of our friendship that we should extend to other people. Now, I want to ask just to start with, have you ever known a hateful Christian? Seems contradictory, right? Seems oxymoronic that you would be Christian and that you would be hateful. Known people that maybe would seem like, I don't know, that they would have a friend in the world. I don't know who would want to be their friend. You know, you may think that about people, and that person is in the audience every single time that they're there. It seems difficult for that to be. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about friendship, and we'll tag with that friendliness as well. I think I think it's important, although they're not necessarily the same thing. A couple of things here. We have some verses from friendship in the Old Testament. Genesis 34:21, we read there, "These men are at peace with us. Therefore, let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For indeed, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us wives, and let us give them our daughters." Genesis 34:21. On the right-hand side, Proverbs 11:13, a talebearer reveals secret, but he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment as well. Proverbs 17:17, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. The last one, Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenances of his friends. One of the things I've noticed in doing these lessons is it feels like we get a lot of verses from Proverbs for what we see here. On the second one here, in the New Testament on the left-hand side, 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 11, "Therefore comfort each other and edify one another, just as you also are doing." The second one, 1 Corinthians 15:33, "Do not be deceived." We'll talk about this as well. "Evil company corrupts good habits," the New King James says. I think maybe it says good morals in the Old King James. I don't guess it's really called the Old King James. It's just the King James. Third one, John 15 and verse 13, "Greater love is no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." And then on the right-hand side, James 4 and verse 4, "Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with this world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God." So there's a few verses there. There's more, of course, than just that, but some examples of friendships. Some thoughts here before we get into our lesson. Some of God's encouragements concern choosing friends wisely, not betraying friends by gossiping or revealing secrets, and picking friends with whom you can both be truthful and supported. Too often we are more interested in gaining friends than in being a good friend. The opposite needs to be our goal. This was geared, I think, towards kids, but I see this on an almost daily basis at school with kids who struggle to develop friendships, struggle to find who they need to be friends with, and struggle in sort of maintaining that. It's interesting. I teach mostly sophomores, but I have a few seniors, and there's something that happens between that 10th grade and that 12th grade year, and you see that change in them. They really struggle with that in the 10th grade year, and by the 12th grade year, they've honed in on their friends, and they've totally tuned out everybody, sometimes even me, people that are dealing with them. But we have to grow into this, and we have to deal with this. And you might be thinking, well, what is this? How does this affect me? We have people in this room that are over 80 years old right now. Right? They are over 80 years old, and they might be saying, "Daniel, this is completely irrelevant to me. I've already got all my friends, and I don't want any more." But what's wrong with that attitude? No. We're content with what we've got. We just don't want to add any more friends to the group. All right. Hold on, Tony. Yeah. Right. That's true. Melvina. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think both of your all's answers right there are exactly what I was sort of aiming for. If somebody walked in here that you've never seen before and you say, well, I've already hit my limit of how many friends I'm going to have. Well, the problem with that is, what are we going to do for that person that comes in, right? Well, it's not a very Christ-like attitude. Yes, that's right. That's right. We do. But we have to. If we're not careful, we can sort of put a fence around us. We can sort of shut things off. And say, well, I've got enough. But maybe worse than that is this notion that might sometimes happen. We say, well, somebody else will befriend that person. Well, who's the somebody else? It's not anybody over here, and it's not anybody over here, and it's not me. So who's going to do it? So into this and say, well, I've got enough. Sorry. Mm-hmm. That is, certainly is. Certainly. Yeah. Right.
Brother that's there.
Yeah.
Not anybody else. And they say, well, I don't really care much about the reunion. So, I just talked to my brother.
Right.
Did you try to talk to anybody else? And if you make an effort to talk to other people, you find out their interest in what, and you may have something in common.
Could be. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You still talking to old people, aren't you? So when we think of, I want to start with the story of David and Jonathan. It's way too much to read. Leland read a handful of verses. This covers it really covers like 8 chapters in the Bible. And I tried. Well, I was getting this ready, and I tried every way in the world to whittle this down to where we would be able. And I just could not make it to where we could read this and not be done. By Saturday afternoon I just didn't think that it was possible. So I've got a few things up here. But we see them first mentioned in the book of 1 Samuel around chapter 18. But just a long story short, David kills Goliath in the valley of Elah, where the Philistine army is in a standoff with the army of King Saul. And Saul is Jonathan's father. And David's victory begins a rout of the Philistines, who are then driven back. And Abner then brings David to Saul while David is still, the Bible says, still holding Goliath's head. Jonathan, the eldest son of Saul, who'd also been fighting against the Philistines, took an immediate liking to David. And you can imagine, so here's somebody that's going to be relatively close in age to you. Your father is the king. You can imagine if your father's the king, you've been in a pretty restricted environment of who you've been able to meet and greet with. My students find it just fascinating and also gross that when we talk about kings and queens in Europe in the 15 and 16 and 17 and 1800s, that their spouses were chosen for them with really limited interest in love, and also not too worried if you're related reasonably close or whatever. And they say, Mr. Hopkins, that just seems so strange. And they're like, well, it is. But if you're in charge, you can't let it get too wide, because then other people are going to be coming at it. And so you can imagine in the situation, Jonathan has been pretty restricted on his people that he would have known. Now, we know about David. Was David anything fancy? In fact, when David's sons to be the replacement king of Saul, Who was probably the least likely to be that? They didn't even trot him. David was the least likely of a whole group of unlikely people to be. And so the two formed a covenant, a bond, a friendship, as we read. And we go a little further. Then David proved a successful commander. And like a lot of successful commanders, the more he won, the more his popularity went where? It went up. Now, if you're the king and you see a successful commander's popularity going up, what's going to happen to you if you're the king? The J, right? A little jealousy there, right? You ever known jealousy to tear apart friendships? As a former middle school teacher, absolutely, I'm familiar with jealousy tearing apart. But in hopes David might be killed by the Philistines, Saul gives David his daughter in marriage and said that David would have her provided that he was able to kill 100 Philistines. And he was successful. And after the wedding, the disappointed Saul sends assassins to try and kill David instead. But David is able to escape. As Saul continues to pursue David, he and Jonathan renewed their covenant, after which they do not meet again. It kind of ends with a sad story. Jonathan is killed, along with his brothers Abinadab and Malchishua, I think would be the way you would pronounce that. It's a little complicated. And then there, Saul also dies as well. Speculation, I was not really thinking about how Saul died, and that's a debatable topic for another time. But David learns of this death. He learns of the death of the king Saul, who tried to kill him, but he also learns of the death of his friend Jonathan, and he says a lament, or sort of a sad poem of that. And so this is just an example of biblical friendship. I thought about talking about Mary, Martha, and Lazarus and Jesus, which would have been an example of that as well. But these are close friends, and all of us can probably give a list of a handful of people who we would consider close friends. People that we have maybe known for a long time, or maybe known not necessarily for a long time, but have known very deeply for specific things. It might be somebody that lives close to us, or it might be somebody who we went to school with, or we go to church with, or something like that. But I want you to think for just a second the importance of that relationship. Whoever it is, you fill in the blank. But why does that relationship mean so much? You don't have to share, but if you want to share, you're welcome to. Why does that relationship with that person, or maybe two or three people that we're extremely close to, why does that mean so much to us? Right. Right. Kind of eats you apart. Other thoughts, or did Ben take all the good answers right there? And sometimes it's something serious and significant, but sometimes it's just it is. And we have that, and that's not a knock on other people, but we have those bonds, or those. So what I want us to think about tonight is we're going to look at a few things, and I'm going to rely on your comments more than anything, because I've got a few things jotted down, but we don't have a ton of Bible verses, but you may want to get your Bible out. I think all the verses are up here, but you can have it out just to be sure, but we'll be sort of all over the place. Yes. Right. Agreed. All right. So we're going to look at four sort of, I don't know if we want to use tips, but just examples of, things that will benefit friendships. And I want us not maybe to think about the people that we are tight with, but maybe somebody that we're not as tight with. Maybe somebody within the church that we can build a, tighter connection with than maybe somebody that we already know. So let's start with the first one. First thing here, may have heard something similar to this, but to find a friend, be a friend. All right. Find a friend, be a friend. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 18 here, verse 24. Jill, do you care to read that on the screen there? Proverbs 18 and verse 24. So, got to first of all show ourselves to be friendly, right? We got to show ourselves to be friendly. So, how do we do that? How do we as a Christian show ourselves to be friendly, worthy of a friend, if we want to think about it that way? Okay. I think that's whatever we like in somebody, sort of maybe show that ourselves. What else? Yeah. Sure. Uh-huh.
I'm glad they came to my life because they were important.
Sure. So, first of all, I think what we're going to see here to start with, and you can see it on the second verse up there, is this notion of trust. And trust is really difficult in life, right? Because think about all the people that we are around over the course of a day, over the course of a week, a month, a year, whatever it might would be. And so many people are just sort of flittering in and out of your life. But who do you afford that trust to? I'm taking off of what Ben just said a minute ago, but let's look at the verse that's here. Proverbs 17 and verse 9. Linda, do you care to read Proverbs 17 and verse 9 up there? Okay, so he who covers a transgression. Let's not think about the word transgression as necessarily a sin right here. If your friend goes out and kills somebody, and we probably might need to deal with that, but we don't always have to tell everything that we know. Do you know somebody who tells everything that they know? We do. And if we're trying to build trust with a friend, they have to know that they can deal with us. They can talk with us, kind of like Ben said, that you're not going to go out and just blab everything that comes up. It means a friend's not going to gossip about a friend's faults or quick to forget them. If you are willing to tell me something and say, I'm struggling with this, or I just made a mistake, or man, this is just really difficult. And the first thing I do is walk up to the front of the church and say, guess what Jill told me just a minute ago? Well, what's wrong with doing that? I've destroyed that. I've betrayed the trust. Is that something that Jill needs told to everybody? Not at all. And you might say, well, it's not really that big of a deal if you tell it to one, but there's a level of sort of trust that's there. Do you know people, or have you known people that will take that bit of information and go straight and tell somebody else? Why do people like that? Why do people like to do that? A little bit of attention. You're probably right. Huh? Makes them feel important. All of that. Any other thoughts on it? Yeah. Yeah.
If you really love and have love for someone, it's going to cover over a lot of their sins. And you see that in Noah's children. The one that went in there singing naked went out and blamed to everyone.
Yeah.
Ended up being under a curse.
Yeah.
And it's God showing us. This is what I think of that kind of thing.
Solomon says here on the back end of Proverbs 17 and verse 9, he who repeats a matter does what? Separates friends. So if that thing that Jill told me just a second ago, I come straight up and tell, what's she going to tell me later? Probably nothing good, maybe something bad. She may fuss at me about that. But not only I'm looking for this sort of quick, just said, but what's the long-term problem there? I've separated a friendship that's there. And what happens when you separate too many friendships? You're all alone. Then you don't have anybody to tell you nothing, but more importantly, you're lacking somebody to what? To be able to speak to yourself, right? And so this is important for us. It's the notion of finding a friend, because we have to be that kind of friend, and we have to be that within the church as well, and that's important for us. All right. Second, godly friends lead to godly behavior. Thoughts on this before we go any further? Just give me a yes or no. So modify this sentence or this title at the top. Change a couple words. Ungodly friends lead to ungodly behavior. Would we say that? All right. How many of you have kids and have had this conversation with your kids somewhere between probably the age of about 6, I don't know, 75, somewhere in between right there? How many of you remember those conversations? And they all went well, right? The kid said, you know what, Mom, you're exactly right. I plan to change everything right now. That's probably not how it went, right? So why did you utter something along the lines of godly friends lead to godly behavior? Why did you tell the child that? Because it's true, because they needed to hear it. Why do you think they weren't necessarily as eager to hear it as you might have been to tell them? Sure. Right.
I always try to get across the fact that don't leave them out to be nice to them, but you cannot let them lead you from how you behave.
Sure.
It's a fine line on telling children what to do and not to do. It's still involved.
Mom, I was 63 years old when Mom died, and right up to the last few months, every time I left her, she said, "Be good." Be good boy.
Right.
I told her, I used to say, "Mom, I'm going to be,"
Right.
But she just kept. She said it for 63 years.
Right.
It finally sinks in after a while.
How many of you all can tell a real similar story of a mom or a dad or a grandparent that uttered something real similar? Let's look at the verse right here. Proverbs 13 and verse 20. Tony, do you care to read that one? Now, this is really hard for us to see, and I think that's what we were looking at there just a moment ago. He who walks with wise men will be what? Wise. And I think all of us would want to be wise. You fill in the blank, whatever wise means to you. But if we look at that verse, it's pretty clear that we model ourselves after someone. We're going to take on their qualities, right? We're going to at least sort of strive to be like them. But the second part, but the companion of fools will what? It doesn't say will be dumb, right? Notice how it says at the start, you'll walk with the wise, you'll be what? You'll be wise. It should have said, but the companion of fools will be a what? Should have said it'd be a fool, but that's not what it says there. It says the companion of fools will be what? Destroyed. Not just a fool, but destroyed right there. So the decision that we make is really important there in who we gather around, who we are with, who we interact with. You ever heard the saying, you are what you eat? I didn't know Dad was going to tell his little Dr. Pepper story right there to start with. That wasn't planned, but Melvin, that's what you're talking about, the providence of God. Things just sort of overlap. It's a little different than when Ben just stands up on the word that I was planning to say Sunday afternoon. That's not exactly saying mean you are what you eat. As you can see. That's true. That's true. Or if you're married to Mary, you plant anything, it just probably won't come up. But it does lead, bad company corrupts good morals, all that kind of stuff. Now, does this also mean that we should just distance ourselves from anyone who is, well, let's just call them bad company? Do we just distance ourselves completely? What do we see in the scriptures Jesus do with people who we probably would have called bad companions or bad company. What does Jesus do? And maybe give me an example or two. He went in amongst them and did what? Acted like them, right? No, went in amongst them, but what? But taught them. What were you going to say? Right. Absolutely. Yes. Right.
Sometimes you can tell your friends, "I think it's a really bad idea."
Right.
And then there's times though, I've always said this, you start dating a young girl, and then she says, "Let's have this great big plan, we'll rob the bank down here." You know what, I don't know how pretty she is or how much I'm attracted to her. I'm gonna say, "Sweetheart, me and you just have to go our separate ways.
Right.
Your lifestyle and mine are completely
Sure.
different, and I don't need a girl from that bank."
Sure.
I think this is a real good example. This is Joe.
Yeah.
He was sick and down on the ash sheets and scraping sores. His friends come along instead of encouraging him and picking him up. They led him into sin. They led him to start to question God. When he held strong through all these other trials, it was his friends that nearly destroyed.
Absolutely. So if we're not careful, we can be ensnared by this, but we can't use that as an excuse to say, I'm not going to ever engage with anybody who doesn't fit my level here. Because who would we engage with in the church if we said, I am not going to deal with anybody who shows up here who's been involved in sin or whatever? Nobody, right? And then we can't do that. So again, we walk a fine line, but we have to do what we said right there. We can't, like you said, there's a lesson there that we don't just jump right in and say, well, whatever you're doing, I'm all in on it. But instead, we still need to communicate, work with, and try to help lead the friend to godly behavior. Third one, friends tell each other the truth. It's difficult, right? Why is it sometimes difficult to tell people? Let's don't put the word friends, but just tell people. Why is it sometimes difficult to tell people the truth?
Sometimes they will lash out.
They lash out at you. Don't want to hurt their feelings. You may be cut off from it. What else? What else? Anything else? So why do we appreciate the truth from some people more than from others? Why they say it? Okay. True. That makes sense. Sure.
For someone to hurt your feelings, you have to value their opinion. And when someone that you value their opinion tells you something, then you're more likely to listen.
Sure. Sure. Let's look at.
I just think about what you talked about Sunday. Nathan, little Nathan, the prophet, goes to the big, famous, world famous king, David, and tells him, "You're the man."
Yeah.
He could have had it, like you said, he could have his head cut off right there on the spot and not know it ever known the difference, okay? But that's why the Bible says David had this man after God's heart. He listened and he examined and said, if I've got a drinking problem, you come to me and say, Dad, you've got a drinking problem. I can get mad at you, I can throw a fit, I can disown you, I can scream and holler, whatever I want to do, beat you up, whatever, anything. But what would be a lot better if I said, you're right.
Right.
I need to do something.
It's only natural, though, for us to sort of lash out when somebody maybe is truthful to us. And sometimes we have to hear the truth multiple times before we're prepared to listen, right? We see biblical examples of that where, it maybe fell on deaf ears, the teachings of Christ or whatever, or of the apostles or what have you. I like the verse that we've got here. This is Proverbs chapter 27. Verses 5 and 6. Connie, do you care to read this one? Sorry, Lucille, you want to read this one? I just really like this right here. So I want to go into that just a little bit. Open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed. If I love you, I need to be willing to tell you the truth, right? Faithful, then it says, are the wounds of a friend. If I tell you the truth, if I love you, if you're my friend and I tell you the truth, is my goal to hurt you? What's my goal? Hopefully to help you or to better you in some way. But this is difficult. That's why we have the second part of the verse, or the second verse that's up there. It says, the kisses of an enemy are what? Deceitful. Have we ever been kissed by the enemy? You ever been told all the good about you by somebody who maybe don't care that much about you? And whenever they're telling you this kind of thing, whenever they're telling you how great you are, what happens to our ego sometimes when we hear how great we are? All the way up here. But the problem is that person that's telling us this may not be worried about your best interest. Nick Saban, who's the football coach at Alabama, and Alabama's always good, and if they lose 2 games a year, it's the worst year ever. He always says at press conferences, we have to make sure the kids don't eat the rat poison. And what he means by that is when you play football at Alabama, what do you think every single person tells Alabama football players? You're the best ever. You are the best. Nobody, there's never been a better quarterback, never been a better lineman, never been a better safety. You are the best at everything. And then what happens if you're not careful when you go out on Saturday and play? What's in your head? I'm the best. And you are clearly not the best. And then what happens Saturday at the end of the game? You got beat. Okay. And should you have gotten beat? No, you were better. But sometimes you think you're even better to hear. As Christians, can we put ourselves up here sometimes? We can start thinking about how good we are. Oh, you're the best at this, or you're the best at that. And then whenever the honesty comes, when the truth comes, when the challenge comes, we sometimes struggle to deal with it, right? Friends will tell you the truth even when it hurts, because a friend doesn't want to see us hurt long term. Other thoughts on this? The last bullet point up here, flattery and patronizing usually do more harm than good. Anybody? Am I taking all the good points? I feel like we're not. I feel like you're building someone up. You're setting them up sometimes for quite a big fall.
Daniel, I had a baseball team after you moved up. I was 10-year-olds, and we were 7-0. And several of the parents came to me, and they were just tickled to death. Their little kid so good, it was great, great. And I hated to tell them, I did tell them, no, we're not getting better. It's the only team I ever had that didn't get better from day one till the end of the year. But some teams are not very good, but they do get better.
Right.
This little team was pretty good, but they never got any better. I think it got worse. And maybe it's my fault. But it's hard to tell somebody when you're 7-0 that, well, we're not really all I want us to be. Because
Right.
you can tell where the road was leading. And it did lead. I was exactly right. It did lead there. It's hard to tell that sometimes.
So as with our friends, especially with our friends in the church, how do we approach this? Telling each other the truth.
I think there's a little bit of a fine line too. If all you do is sit there and tell everybody their faults and their wrongs and point out stuff that you think they should be doing better, and pretty soon they're going to start to just avoid you.
Right.
Hear all this stuff.
Right.
We've got to make sure, yes, we need to tell them the truth, but we also need to flatter them and really build them up.
Yeah, you're right. There's a fine line there between. Anything else on that one? We got one more, but anything else on this one? All right. Fair weather and foul weather friends. All right. Anybody know what this means? What this term? If something's fair weather or foul weather, you know what it means? All right. Fair weather fans, they talk about in sports. When the team's winning, what do the bleachers look like? They're full. When the team loses one game, what immediately happens? Worst team in the world. I knew they's bad from the beginning. I was just spending $30 a day tickets just cause, I had plenty of extra money. But fair weather, we're good up here. Do you have you ever experienced fair weather friends? We can, right? We all can experience or maybe have experienced this at some point. A fair weather friend, it's really hard to say those alliterative terms. A fair weather friend is there when what happens? When it's good, right? When everything is going good, that friend is right there. Why? It is. No problems. It's easy. A little bit of the glow that's coming off you may shine on me just a little bit right there as well. What about foul weather friends?
You need to be friends with your friends. It's good times for it's bad. Some people, everything goes on, they're gonna leave and they don't care.
Absolutely. Stick with us through the most difficult times. I don't know what your most difficult time was. I probably do, but I may not. But I would almost guarantee that whatever your most difficult time was, there's a name that's paired with that most difficult time. I don't know who it is. Maybe two. I doubt it's more than 2 or 3 names, but it's probably one or so that when I went through my most difficult time, this person was right there. What does that tell you about that person? You love them to pieces. Is that fair weather or is that foul weather? No matter what happens, and no matter what happens, they're going to be right there. Proverbs 17 and 17 right there. Ben, do you care to read that? So a friend loves at all times. That seems so honest, right? It seems so true, seems so easy. And maybe that's the standard that we should judge our friendship with. Is my friend loving me at all times? Is my fellow Christian loving me at all times? Am I loving my other fellow Christians at all times? If we can't put a check in the box beside that one, is that truly a friend? I don't think it can. I don't think we can. And those types of things, those trials, those adversities, those difficulties are what will separate us quite often from those who don't really want to be there. I will be very honest with you. There are people in my life who I have been close with at various times that had one too many problems come up. And I was like, we can talk, I'll still say, but I just have to remove these are people that I have been quite close with at various points. You can probably tell a similar story in that, but that's just not the person that you maybe are totally connected with. But they love him or her as they love themselves, as you can see there, thick and thin, sickness and health, poverty and wealth. What do those sound like right there? Those are marriage vows, right? Now, you're not married to your friend, but in many ways, you kind of are. You've probably been with the friend longer than you've been with the husband or wife in many cases. But those same kind of difficulties that may arise in a marriage are the kind of difficulties that you're going to have with other people in your life as well. And you may want that spouse for that, but that friend can play that role as well. Yeah.
24-year-old supermodel married an 86-year-old billionaire.
Yeah.
And everybody's little, and she says, I just married him because he's fantastic.
Absolutely.
But he loses all his money, I'm done. We know that it happens all the time, and that's the fair fact, because most 86-year-olds don't wind up marrying supermodels if they're just hot or something.
Just gorgeous. It's hard to ruin the hopes of y'all 86-year-olds in here, though. So it ain't real. Just gonna let you know that right off the bat there. All right. So let's take away from this before we wrap up. First of all, I think our takeaway one: friends are indispensable in this life. It's gonna be really hard to go through life without a friend, right? It's gonna be really, really difficult. I'm not saying you got to have a million, but it's really nice to know that there are people that we can rely on. And the older we get, the more valued our friendships become. Lucille sort of took my example from me there at the start, because I know that she and Geraldine have been very close for a long time. Are you better friends today or worse friends? Probably. And I'd say if they both live 20 more years, they'll probably be even tighter 20 years from now than they are right now. Those grow because you've went through so much with each other. And a lot of times we may be even closer with those people than our brothers and sisters. And sometimes geography does that. Sometimes within the church does that. You're with these people more than whatever. Sometimes our neighborhood or our community does that. Proverbs 27 and verse 10. Booty, care to read that? The neighbor there is your friend, and that somebody, the person that you know will be there in that distance. Again, Proverbs is full of good stuff for us tonight here. This value of friends, one of the most important things in life, and their worth is not, this is not my sentence, I took this, but their worth is not diminished by inflation, is not worn out by use, but as we see there, only improves as time goes along. And if it's not improving, might be a problem there as well. So what I want us to take, and I know this may have seemed like I kind of seem like a guidance counselor in elementary school tonight, talking with you all about this. But I want us to find, you don't have to make, this doesn't have to be like, we're not holding up a card or anything like that. But I want us to find somebody within the church over the next month that we've not been as tight with. And instead of like what we talked about earlier about, just kind of pivoting straight to our specific person, but find somebody else that maybe we don't know as much about, or maybe we're not as familiar with, or maybe we just haven't always been as tight with as others, and use this time together to be able to sort of make that connection. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't really care who it's going to be. I'm not asking that, but you know who you're tighter or not quite as tight with, and use your time here to be able to build that. Because how strong will the church be if we make those closer connections, not just with some, but with all of the people? Think about something that's woven together. When you think about, you weave something together, when you try to pull it, what happens? It gets tighter, right? It gets tighter because it's so interconnected. Well, if everybody on this side of the room is best friends and everybody on this side of the room is best friends, but nobody ever crosses across this carpet, what's going to happen whenever there's difficulty in the building? It's going to run right down the middle and we'll fall either way. And it cannot stand, as the old saying goes, the house divided. So whatever you need to do to help do that, then do that. But I certainly hope that you'll be willing to look for that as well.
That's just one thing I'd add to it. Just do your best to avoid toxic friendships. There's some people who get involved in toxic friendships, and they get hurt, and they get hurt, and they get hurt, and they get hurt. And sometimes, like you said, you got to pull back from that.
Right.
That don't mean you hate them. That don't mean you disown them. But you just have to pull back from that toxic relationship because it just keeps stepping.
Sure.
And you can't, and it's overwhelming, especially young people. I see.
Sure. Sure. It might have been geared toward younger people. Not, I apologize, but I tried to steer it toward toward everyone else as well. So whatever it might be, whatever you need, just know that the importance of that friendship is going to always be there. But the only way to really be that is to be that for somebody else as well. And our best example is that of Jesus, right? The friendship that he had. We read just a moment ago that greater love hath no man than to do what? Lay down his life. Who laid their life down for you? Jesus did. Jesus Christ did. And that's the best example of friendship. And we are separated from Jesus right now because of geography, like we said a minute ago. But because of what he did, it opens the door for us when this life is over to be reunited with Jesus as well. I think the invitation song is here, and I think this is a good one for us to steer us home as well. So what I would ask of you, what I would say is if there's anything we can do for you, any way we can help you, whatever it could be, we'd invite you to come while we stand and sing.